I didn't intend to view that message. However, I did. And as I finished reading it, I realized that I would never again view my family the same way. The afternoon was a Tuesday. My shift at the hospital had just ended. I worked for 12 hours straight, dealing with patients, charts, and crises. On the bus ride home, I was hungry, tired, and hankering after nothing more than some peace and quiet. I was always a part of our family group chat, even though it felt like I wasn't there most of the time. My phone buzzed with a message from that chat, which was just a list of names: Mom, Dad, Emma, Tyler, and me. I browsed mindlessly, anticipating the typical conversation, memes, pictures of Tyler's new dog, or Emma's never-ending updates about her wedding preparations. However, what I witnessed chilled my blood. It said, "Ugh, from Emma. What a parasite she is. She still depends on her parents, lives alone, and doesn't have any true family of her own. It's pitiful." I blinked. "Honestly, I don't understand why they keep letting her stay in the loop," Tyler responded. "She is a burden. When was the last time she helped this family, really? What was the most distressing aspect?" They were unaware that I remained in the conversation. Their digital whisper behind my back had been spoken directly in front of my face, and they had inadvertently pushed reply all. I merely sat there, frozen. Every other person on the bus was preoccupied with their affairs. A few fell asleep. Some scrolled through TikTok. Some gazed out the window in blankness. But me? The floor seemed to have collapsed beneath me. Parasite. With every heartbeat, the word reverberated louder. I made an effort to breathe. I forced myself to acknowledge that it was a mistake. Perhaps they weren't referring to me. It might have been someone else. My mother then added her voice. She typed, "I know she means well." Yet occasionally I question whether we ought to have severed our relationship years ago. Stop me? Each month I was the one who sent them money, silently. They went about their business quietly. When Dad's pension was insufficient, I covered their expenses. Last March, I paid Emma's school debt balance. When Tyler lost his job, I sent him money for petrol. They didn't have to ask, so they didn't. I made an offer. I wanted to assist. And yet, they were accusing me of being a parasite while hiding behind the shield of group chat security. I gazed at the image of myself in the bus window. I had sleepy eyes. My hands hurt. Hours of coffee had left stains on my scrub top. My heart, on the other hand, felt as though it had been abandoned. I didn't respond, then no. I simply ended the conversation. There should be no grandiose farewell. Avoid conflict. Simply gone. They must have noticed my stillness because a few minutes later, my phone buzzed once more, this time containing a private message from Mom. "That wasn't intended for you, honey. It was merely a release. Don't be upset about it. Was it not meant for me? She could have etched it into my flesh as easily." "That message was the truth," finally said aloud. "It wasn't a mistake." I took a final look up to make sure I hadn't misread anything. However, no. In stark, unvarnished honesty, it was all there. Emma, parasite. Tyler, a burden. Mom ought to have interrupted her. It's funny how people show who they really are when they believe no one is looking. At my regular bus stop, I got off. It was only a few blocks to my flat. Usually, I would take the detour, visit the nearby bakery, and perhaps get a warm croissant for some comfort. However, I made the decision to walk home that day. The silence welcomed me like an old friend as soon as I unlocked the door. There was no sound, don't laugh, don't judge, just tranquility. I sat on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and gazed at the wall. I realized then that something needed to change, because I had been going out of my way to prove myself to them for years, making excuses for their shortcomings, disregarding their brutality. I thought that if I tried a little more and gave a little more, they would eventually accept me as a member of the family rather than an outsider. The truth was out now, though. I was unable to avoid seeing it. Every birthday they forgot, every invitation that never arrived, and every family photo in which I wasn't included were all replayed in my mind. I recalled the year I received a candle and Emma received a new automobile. Tyler complained to our parents that I was hard to live with after crashing at my house for 3 weeks without paying rent. I was put to use, and that's when I realized I needed to take action. People believe betrayals of that nature occur abruptly. One minute, everything appears normal, and suddenly, someone stabs you in the back. However, that is not how my tale unfolded. Slowly, it happened. Silently. Similar to a leak beneath the floorboards, you don't see it until everything has rotted out. I didn't cry as I exited the group chat that evening. I refrained from screaming. I simply remained motionless in my flat, allowing the quiet to envelop me like a heavy blanket. Junie, my cat, leapt into my lap and purred pleasantly. The only person who never made a request was she. Never passed judgment. I never told lies. Simply put, that relationship lived alongside me. All of a sudden, that relationship seemed to be the most consoling one I had ever experienced. I slept in the following morning, something I hadn't done in years. No early shift. Don't check on mom's prescription drugs. I used to assist Tyler with his rent payment just until he gets back on his feet, so I won't be checking it again. I remained in bed and listened to the infrequent traffic outside my window and the hum of the refrigerator. My time was mine for once. Silence, of course, is not permanent. My phone buzzed once more around lunchtime. Mom missed a call. Next, Emma. Then Dad texted me. Give us a call. We must discuss what transpired. What took place? They gave the impression that I had done something incorrectly, as if my response was the issue, not what they said. That's my family's problem. They didn't shout. I never tossed anything. However, the manipulation of emotions remains a mystery. The manipulation of emotions was silent, merciless, and continued without interruption. Guilt permeated every discussion. Even though they rarely gave me favors, they kept them in their pockets like receipts, ready to retaliate against me if I refused. I didn't return their call. Instead, I reached into my bookshelf and took out an old photo album. It was one of the few items I had saved from my early years. I took my time turning the pages, vacations, holidays, and birthdays. Aside from, most of them didn't include me. Emma's birthday was at the beach, and although I remembered I had the flu, nobody brought me cake. I requested someone to save me a seat at Tyler's high school graduation while I was working my part-time job. They didn't. 4 years ago, there was Christmas. Mom was recuperating from surgery, so I hosted it in my small flat. I prepared food, cleaned, purchased presents for each person. What did I receive? A mug that had been regifted but still had a slight lipstick stain on it. I chuckled. It's the kind of laugh that erupts when you realize how stupid you've been, not the kind that comes from happiness. When I turned the page, I saw a photo of us all at Disneyland. Emma was ahead, making a peace sign. Tyler's ears were Mickey's. Dad and Mom stood side by side. I was in the background, cut off halfway, lugging the baggage. In our family, I've always been out of frame, partially visible. Not exactly, but there. Nevertheless, they relied on me. I paid the retainer fee when Emma sought divorce counsel after her husband cheated on her. I sent weekly transfers to Tyler when he needed money for Uber rides after his automobile accident. I handled the pharmaceutical expenses after Mom had a heart attack, and Dad's insurance did not cover the new prescription. I was referred to as a parasite. In actuality, though, I was the source of the damn power, the silent generator that made their lives easier, and they didn't ever express gratitude. I believe that realizing they never saw me was more difficult than what they stated. I wasn't a sister or a daughter to them. I was a legless wallet, a heartbeat-equipped ATM. The days following the conversation event were all hazy. I was aloof when I got to work. The jokes the nurses said in the break room didn't make me chuckle. I didn't volunteer to work extra hours. I simply sailed. Maya, a coworker, caught up to me in the corridor one afternoon. She murmured softly, "Hey, are you okay?" I started to lie to claim that I was all right. However, her serene and genuine expression stopped me in my tracks. I said, "I'm exhausted." Not in a physical sense, simply soul weary. She refrained from pressing, simply gave me a nod and followed me silently to the vending machine. She handed me a bag of trail mix and added, "If you don't keep your peace, people will take everything from you." That line was like a lifeline to me. I lay in bed that night and relived all the instances in which I had said yes when I wanted to say no. Yes, while you're in between jobs, I'll assist in paying the mortgage. Yes, on my one day off, I will provide free babysitting. I will indeed postpone my holiday in order to attend to your emergency. Yes, yes, yes. What had I received in exchange? I was called a parasite in a group chat message. Reaching for my phone, I launched my banking app. I set up several auto transfers to send money to my family for years. The system has been stable, but it hasn't achieved anything spectacular, trustworthy. Similar to clockwork, I canceled every one of them. As I did it, my heart was racing. It's from insight, not fear. I wasn't going to pay for my own embarrassment for once. That night, I went to bed lighter. Although I felt lighter, my mood was far from cheerful, as if I had removed a coat that was drenched in shame and rain. The silence was terrible the following day. Nobody made a call. Nobody sent a message. It seemed as though I had never been there. Strangely, I felt powerful for the first time in years at that moment. Regaining dignity is an odd experience. It doesn't happen explosively. There is no moment of cheering or a defining moment that instills a sense of heroism. That's not how calm it is. Until it clears up, it feels like you're walking in a fog you weren't even aware you were in. I waited after canceling the bank transfers, awaiting the messages to begin pouring in, awaited the ringing of the telephone, awaiting the impending storm. However, nothing appeared. Nobody said, "Hey, what happened? I noticed the transfer didn't go through." No one said. They remained silent. The insult was less painful than that silence, because that indicated they had only observed what I offered them, not me as a person. And I was invisible once more when I quit providing. I made an effort to continue. My anchor was my work. At least there, I earned respect, required, appreciated. But concentration was difficult. I heard Maya and several other nurses conversing outside the clinic one afternoon as I was restocking supplies in the storage closet. One person stated, "I don't know how she does it. She always sends care packages home and covers shifts. I couldn't bear that much burden." "I went cold," Maya answered. "I just hope her family knows how lucky they are." Something inside of me broke when that happened. A painful, slow break. Since they were unaware, even terrible, they showed no concern. I opened the folder containing all of my financial information as soon as I arrived home that evening and sat down at my desk. Years' worth of money orders, receipts, and bank statements. Evidence. I sent all the money. I had paid all of my medical bills. I had purchased each birthday present when no one could remember mine. I had preserved all of this, and it hit me like a rock wall. Why? "What have you done for us?" was the question I hoped someone would ask one day. In order for me to extract it as a defense exhibit? No. I believe I had secretly stored it as a reminder that I was important. Because you begin to gauge your value by what you give up when no one shows you love freely. I also journaled that evening, something I hadn't done in years. I put everything in writing, the pathetic, the terrible, and the good. I wrote about Emma's showing off her new iPhone after taking out a loan for urgent dental work. For the 5th consecutive year, I wrote about Tyler promising to pay me back soon. I wrote about Mom boasting in church that my daughter's a nurse. She takes care of all of us while complaining about her arthritis medication. I kept writing till my hand ached. Then, it was the best sleep I'd had in months. The quiet persisted in the days that followed. Nobody inquired about my well-being. Nobody expressed regret. Nobody made any indication that they were aware of what they had done. Until one afternoon, out of habit, I opened the family group chat and noticed something different. Emma sent a message. "Is there anyone who knows why the electricity bill was unsuccessful? I believed Rachel was able to handle it." Rachel. "I am Matt." Nobody answered. Tyler then added, "She most likely forgot. Once more." I gazed at that word once more, as though I had forgotten anything at all. They grumbled that I was too sensitive or dramatic, as if I hadn't kept their lives together for the previous 10 years. "I ought to have disregarded it," went on, "shut down the application." But something inside of me exploded. I responded for the first time. In reality, last week I canceled every transfer. "All of you have reached adulthood. You often claimed that I was getting in the way of your independence, so I assumed you would want it." Instantly, red receipts appeared. Nobody answered. Nothing. I chuckled. A harsh, unpleasant sound reverberated throughout my flat. The truth was not what they desired. My quiet was convenient to them. I gave Maya a call that evening. "Do you want to have dinner?" I inquired. A pause occurred. Such as, "Away from the workplace?" Yes, I said, as in genuine human connection. She laughed. Are you all right? No, I answered plainly, but I am beginning to be. We met at a little downtown Thai restaurant. We discussed life, career, and childhood. I let her in on everything: the years of being used, the money, and the group chat. She listened without passing judgment. Have you ever considered going up against them? She inquired. I did, right now, in the conversation. Was it fulfilling? I gave a headshake. Not really. That's when I understood that their response doesn't provide closure. It results from your choice to no longer require it. I took a risk the following day. I sent a financial planner an email. I could at least learn how to spend it on myself if I wasn't willing to spend thousands on my unappreciative family. My first appointment was set for the following week. I also took out a notebook and began to brainstorm ideas for another project I had put off for years, starting my own company. I've always wanted to start a modest health consulting business where I could support and help individuals manage their chronic illnesses with dignity. The kind of attention I wish I had received. It was horrible. However, it also felt correct. Rachel in the past would have doubted it. I would have gotten Mom's opinion, would have held off till after Tyler's rent was paid. However, Rachel was worn out. She also had no intention of returning. I hadn't blocked anyone yet. I didn't have to. They weren't making contact. That told me everything. I no longer anticipated receiving a communication, a thank you note, or an apology from them. However, I still had a part of me longing for something. A response? A clash. There was an attempt to recast me as the antagonist. They always managed to find a way. It took some time to happen. Not directly, anyway. I received an email instead. Not from my siblings, not from my mother, from the utility provider. The payment method had been deleted. Therefore, it appears that the bill that had always been in my name had defaulted. After canceling all transfers, I closed the autopay in the hopes that they would notice and intervene. They hadn't. My childhood home, which I hadn't visited in almost 2 years, was now just a few days away from losing electricity. I spent a lot of time looking at the notification. It was no longer my home. It was no longer a place I felt emotionally attached to. This does not apply to financial matters, not even in a legal sense. I had no duty to continue paying for it and no motive to do so. However, I still hesitated for some reason. Did it involve guilt? Was it terror? No. Programming was involved. Years of indoctrination to feel accountable to everyone. Not this time, though. I then sent the email to my mom. No remark, no text. Just your turn as the subject line. 5 minutes later, the red receipt arrived. Then there was quiet. I didn't give a damn. Now, I was more concerned with myself than anything else. I had started the process of starting my own practice. It was simultaneously horrifying, thrilling, and draining. I was studying legal requirements, marketing, and business permits. I watched lessons every night. I researched templates and created client plans every morning before work. I was reconstructing a life that was unrelated to them. And yet, the past has a tendency to resurface. Maya and I had coffee in the park close to the hospital one afternoon. Her phone buzzed while we were discussing plans for the weekend. She scowled as she looked at it. What is it? I inquired. She turned the TV in my direction, a post on Facebook, from Emma, my sister. It's absurd how some people feel as though their degree makes them superior to their family. Blood is blood. Without your roots, you are nothing, regardless of how much money you believe you have. I let out a slow breath. They had their claws out. Maya's eyebrow went up. Is that you? Most likely. Not important, I uttered. However, it was significant. It was always important. I received the call I had been half expecting later that evening. Tyler was the one. He didn't even greet me. Launched straight in. You stopped paying the bills, according to Mom. Rachel, what the devil? I let my fury swell but not spill over as I leaned back against the kitchen counter. Calmly, I responded. I stopped because I'm not your bank. He gave a scornful, resentful laugh. You think you're so powerful now? I believe I'm finished. With what? Helping those who don't respect me. He fell silent. Then, Mom isn't doing well, you know. You believe she is deserving of this? My fingers clenched into a fist. You have no right to hurl mom at me. Emma labeled me a parasite when she was sitting in that group chat. She chuckled. She made a contribution. All of you did. That was an idle remark, he whispered. No, I replied. That was the reality. Mine is the truth, not yours. He made an effort to argue, to fabricate an account, and to instill guilt in me. However, I had already heard it all, so I didn't cry this time. I didn't plead to be understood this time. This time, I hung up after listening to him until he had exhausted all possible explanations. His number was blocked by me. Emma's was then blocked by me. Lastly, I turned off the group chat. I didn't remove it. Not quite yet. However, I also didn't want to hear from them. Rather, I grabbed the sketchbook I kept on my bedside table, the one in which I had been creating my company's emblem, Truewell Care. It felt natural. I filed my LLC the following week. I then sent my landlord an email. I was leaving. Nearer to the neighborhood I've always admired, but never allowed myself to live in because the rent's too high, or mom might need help. Next month, I'd discovered a modest studio with more natural light. However, it is no longer the case. I was picking myself. Then an unexpected event occurred. I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox. I recognized the handwriting, but there was no return address. My mom's. It wasn't long. Rachel, we have always loved you, even if we don't always express it. I have no idea why you have changed. When you're ready, return. Mom. I gazed at the text. Don't apologize. No possession. Nothing about what they had said or how they had affected my emotions. Just a tug, vague and emotive, the type that used to draw me back in. Now, though, I carefully folded the letter and put it in the drawer. This was not because the letter held any particular importance, but because I might require a reminder of my reasons for leaving at some point. Now I was on my way, slowly but surely. And this time, nobody was stopping me. Nobody was there to join me in celebrating as I opened the doors to my new workplace. And strangely, I didn't mind. Tucked away in a converted co-op building a few blocks from downtown, it was a humble place. Sunlight danced through the enormous windows as if it had been waiting for me, illuminating the exposed brick walls and groaning hardwood floors. There was a person who had previously been unseen. Now, someone entered with a proud demeanor. I put up a straightforward plaque by the door. Counseling and coaching. By appointment only, Truewell Care. And suddenly, I started over. It was quiet for the first several weeks. I distributed business cards to gyms, coffee shops, and local markets. On the weekends, I conducted free wellness classes. I gave first-time customers a discount. My calendar filled up slowly. Initially, my calendar was occupied by individuals who were merely interested. After that, with those that returned, one evening I sat in my chair, drinking lukewarm tea and going over my messages after a lengthy session with a client who made me think too much of my younger self. I saw it at that moment. They had no intention of speaking to me. They were discussing me. Once more. This time, however, they neglected to take me out of the discussion. Or perhaps they had lost interest. I scrolled. Emma. She obviously believes she is superior to us. Even as a child, she exuded that attitude. Tyler. She acts as though we owe her money simply because she provided assistance for a few years. Mom. She was sensitive all the time. She believes that her wealth elevates her above her family. Then a picture. Within the home. Dark. Empty. And a remark. Let's see how long she can survive on her own. She'll return with a vengeance. I gazed at the display. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I captured a screen grab. Then I answered, to the team, I already provided for you. You can now pay your own bills and talk about me. Forward. The communications ceased one by one. After that, nobody spoke again. However, nothing they could have written could have overshadowed the quiet. And the noise was going to increase. Because I had covertly made an investment in something else, which none of my family members knew. Not limited to my work. Not only my flat. But something more substantial. Maya had questioned me months prior, during one of my breakdowns, if money, family, and expectations didn't get in the way, what would you build if you could? And I had muttered the response, a room. This room is dedicated to individuals like myself, who were never truly observed. She thus assisted me. We co-signed a lease for a second flat upstairs from mine. I transformed it into a communal space with free classes, job counseling, and a small food bank. This transformation was a silent revolution in the field of healing. After years of being taken for granted, I was suddenly investing every dollar I had earned into something that offered individuals a second opportunity. I didn't bring it up to my family at all. Not after seeing my mom's heartbreaking Facebook post. Not when I received a direct message from Emma's boyfriend asking if I still had that money plug. Not even when Tyler pretended to want to check in by sending me a private message. I didn't participate. I didn't elaborate. However, I had a better idea. Truewell was sponsoring a stand at an upcoming local wellness expo. We were highlighting examples of people who had been written off by society, by systems, or by family and who somehow rebuilt themselves, as well as offering free coaching sessions and materials. I spoke for a little while. I kept names to myself. However, I stated this: even when they sip from the well you dug yourself, others may occasionally call you a burden. You have two options. Either you walk away and create something better for yourself, or you spend your life proving them incorrect. I went with option number 2, and everything altered as a result. It felt like clear applause. There was no pretense involved, no show. I was just spotted by strangers, actually. A young lady with hazy eyes came up to me after the talk. She remarked, "I believe I am also the family's black sheep. Do you believe the pain will ever go away?" I gave her all of my attention. "It doesn't stop," I said. "However, you gain strength, and eventually, the suffering becomes strength." She seemed to believe me because she nodded. Perhaps she did. I got home later that evening and looked at my email. A single message that has not been read. Inheritance is the subject line. I slowly opened it. My grandma had apparently left behind a small property, but she had died months ago. Everyone thought Tyler or Emma would get it. The will, however, was clear. To Rachel, for the one who never asked for gratitude and gave without being asked. The place wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even in very good condition. It was mine, though. And I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do with it. The property was situated on a peaceful street with worn-out fences and trees. Years had passed since it was last painted. In the center, the porch droops. Curling over the sidewalk as if they had taken possession of it out of loneliness were weeds. It was still a house, though, still a present. It's only the beginning. Using a key no one else had ever used, I entered. Everything smelt of old paper and dust, and the air was heavy. It was mine, though. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by something that no one could take away from me, as no one had given it to me out of obligation or guilt. The task fell to me. Selected. As I gently made my way through each area, I reflected on how many times I had remained in the background of other people's lives out of fear of taking up space. No more. I brought a tiny bag and spent the night on an inflatable mattress with a tea thermos and a single lamp that weekend. I dreamed like a youngster who had just been told they mattered while I gazed at the ceiling. I began outlining it the following morning. I had no intention of keeping this place to myself. I intended to make it a haven. For women such as myself, it would serve as a sanctuary. The ones who were constantly told they were either too little or too much. They were told they were either too loud or too quiet, too dependent, too powerful, too much trouble. My friend, a carpenter and former customer, volunteered to assist with the repairs at no cost. Another acquaintance assisted in filing the nonprofit registration paperwork. And before I knew it, the ancient gate had a skewed sign hanging outside. The hearth, a gentle landing spot. However, the world I had left behind started to fall apart as I created a new existence in silent resistance. My sister was the first to do it. One evening, Emma arrived at my flat without warning. I didn't immediately open the door when I heard the knock. From the peephole, I observed her. Her mascara was smudged, and her eyes were puffy. She wasn't dressed in her typical, carefully chosen attire. I just partially opened the door. Startled, she raised her head. There was nowhere else for me to go. I remained silent. She let out a breath that seemed to have been held for years. Tyler gained access to Mom's accounts, took everything, claimed it was for family expenses, but Mom assumed you were lending a hand once more. I blinked. What made her believe that? Emma flinched. Because she always expects you to arrive regardless of what we say, everything we do. She only expects you to pardon her. I took a step back, to put more distance between us, not to let her in. Emma, why are you here? She winced. I suppose I wanted to apologize for the group chat, for referring to you in that way. Parasite, despite not having been spoken out loud, the word reverberated. And there it was. I had carried the truth like bricks heaped by those I cared about. After a lengthy pause, I added, I don't need an apology. I require boundaries. She appeared perplexed. You have to ask to come here, I said. When you need aid, you shouldn't demand kindness or talk about me as if I don't exist. Family isn't about convenience. Convenience, that is. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Emma nodded slowly. I took her pain seriously. However, pain isn't necessarily a justification. She retreated and replied, I'll go. Maybe you should know, I thought. I understand that things have been difficult, Rachel, but we are still related. I raised you. I gave up something. After playing the message twice, I erased it. Not everything that calls itself family behaves as such. I got a letter later that week. No message. I didn't receive a voicemail. The envelope contained my handwritten name. No address for return. There was one photograph and a folded piece of paper inside. I was the one, 12 years old, in a jumper of faded red, beside the family's Christmas tree, on the floor. Everybody else had been cut out of the picture. In an unknown script on the reverse of the picture, you were sufficient at all times. I apologize that we missed it. No name, no signature, but I spent hours staring at that picture. Because sometimes the folks who shattered you aren't the ones who can heal you. It results from recognizing the gaps and repairing them on your own. I hosted our first group circle as the hearth gradually came to life, complete with warm lighting, new paint, and donated furnishings. 6 females, all ages, different tales, the same pain. I used to think being invisible was my fault, one of them remarked, that they would notice if I were better, louder, prettier, or more helpful. I thought that too, said another woman, until I came to the realization that some individuals just see what benefits them. I said very little. I simply listened. One woman then gave me a hug and said, I appreciate you making this space. It wasn't until I entered that I realized I needed it. That evening, as I stood in the hearth's kitchen with my hands encircling a broken cup, I muttered to myself, this is what I did, not for them, not to establish anything. However, for me, for the me who used to believe she had to prove herself worthy of love by being helpful. That falsehood has been unlearned by me, and I had constructed truth in its stead. The hardest thing isn't always leaving, it's avoiding it. Even when they return with charming vows, gentle tones, or well-crafted excuses, I don't despise them. I don't. I just no longer mistake love for tolerance. That last knock on my door was months ago. Because of the voicemail. Because of the picture. Who sent it is still a mystery to me. Perhaps I never will know. However, it is now framed and displayed on a little shelf in the main room at the hearth, serving as a reminder that even invisible children should be seen. I no longer send money, not because I harbor resentment. However, I don't pay to be abused anymore. But what about the irony? The truth began to flow as soon as the money stopped. My brother gave me a call once. I didn't respond. He just wanted to check in, he wrote in his message. That meant something to me. Something was needed for them. Once more. However, I was no longer responsible for solving that issue. I chose to concentrate on the life I had created rather than the one I had once pleaded to be a part of. On Sundays, I led workshops on budgeting. I had the privilege of cooking and sharing meals with women who had once been acquaintances but had now become like sisters. Along with learning how to patch walls and mend leaking faucets, I planted rosemary beside the fence. I laughed even harder. She shed fewer tears. I also went to sleep, profoundly, calmly. I discovered an unopened envelope from years ago one calm afternoon while going through a box of old items in the hearth cellar, nestled inside the pages of a book I never got around to reading. It was a card for a birthday. Nothing, never sent. From my mother, addressed to me. There was no mistaking the handwriting. The hesitancy in each word was the same. She had purchased the card. It bears my name, but didn't sign it. I held it as I stood there, wondering why. Why not finish after going so far? Then I realized that she had always been more adept at nearly falling in love with me. I was finished settling for nearly. I sat by myself in the kitchen that evening with a cup of chamomile and the light turned down after the women had gone to bed. I launched my laptop and entered a brief message into the chat room for the family group. The same one, indeed. When they believed I wouldn't be around, they had utilized it to gossip about me. Hey, everybody. I wanted to let you know that I will no longer be a part of this organization. I'm not upset. I've finished acting. I'm not someone you have to like. But you can't expect support if you talk about me behind my back. I wish you luck in resolving this. Be careful. I then selected Leave Group. Not a single explosion. Don't argue. Not a drama. Nothing but quiet and tranquility. I hoped they would get in touch once again. However, nobody did. Perhaps they felt ashamed. Perhaps they were indifferent to the situation. Perhaps both. However, I also didn't give a damn, not in a resentful manner. I mean, in the calm, freeing, I've moved on type of manner. That year, I was surrounded by people who saw me for who I was, not for what I could offer. I received a deep forest green hand-knit scarf from one of the women at the hearth. It reminded her of my strength, she said. I spent the entire day wearing it. Following dinner, we danced barefoot on the wood floors while playing music. We laughed so hard that our guts ached after someone cooked cookies that burnt on the bottom. Additionally, I didn't feel alienated during the holidays for the first time in my life. I had a sense of selection. I had reconstructed my life, not by blood, but by affection, by the individuals I now referred to as family. Do I occasionally miss them? Indeed. Not enough, though, to return. The girl I used to be comes to mind occasionally, the one who said nothing, who waited for scraps of affection while sending money, who fervently hoped they would say thank you one day. However, I also consider the woman I have become. A parasite is not what I am. A burden is not what I am. It is not acceptable to put up with me. I work as a builder, a survivor, a healer, and that's the true kind of retaliation. Not demonstrating their incorrectness, but demonstrating to myself that my desire for more was always justified. Have you ever felt alienated inside your own family? If you've ever donated a lot of money only to have others call you names behind your back, know this: if you've ever felt invisible, you're not by yourself. You also deserve better. You are not claimed by your family. Family is the group that chooses you even when you are at your lowest. And now I pick myself, at last. With pride. Totally.